Josie, I think we're ready to go.
All right. We are live.
All right. Good evening. 7:01 p.m. on 28th of July, 2022. Quorum being present, this meeting of the Annapolis Historic Preservation Commission shall come to order. This commission operates pursuant to the land use article of the annotated code of the state of Maryland. Local authority for the commission is derived from municipal code for the city of Annapolis, chapter 21, section 56. The purpose of the HPC is to preserve sites, structures, and districts of cultural, historical, archaeological, architectural significance. Requirements for serving on the commission are detailed in chapter 21, section 806. The HPC operates pursuant to the State of Maryland Open Meetings Act, and therefore no pending application shall be discussed between or amongst commissioners outside the public hearing to determine the disposition of any application. Okay, that's first on the agenda. Next on the agenda is roll call. I am Tim Leahy. I serve as chair. Kevin Smith here. Will Scott
here.
Bill Williams
Here.
Kim Finch
Present.
Okay, and we have John Tower, who is our Chief of Historic Preservation. Kimberly Consoli is doing a great job in taking our minutes. I do, if Josie, if there's anyone from the law firm, Lisa Bell said she might join tonight. She serves as our new counsel, so she may be joining if she would like to be promoted. She can. Okay.
Lisa Bell. Okay.
Lisa Bell, if she happens to drop in.
Okay.
All right. Next on the agenda is other business. We have two items that are pre-applications tonight. So the first is 109 Duke of Gloucester Street, St. Mary's. So those folks who are here representing St. Mary's, Josie, can you promote them and we'll have a conversation.
Yes, they should be rejoining now.
Okay.
We have Pat, Mark, Kevin, and Joe.
All righty. As they pop in, show their cameras, I'll have, I guess, welcome back, St. Mary's team. And I guess, Pat, are you going to lead the charge?
I will, and
Okay.
I have many helpers who will jump in.
Okay,
as,
so you can.
as needed. Okay, so
let me just introduce the concept again here. This is a pre-application for your future formal application, and it's a design review. It's an accommodation for applicants to provide design feedback and feasibility comments. So do you understand that comments tonight aren't binding and don't imply approval or disapproval?
Understand.
Understand. Okay, please go ahead and introduce your team, and I think you can show us your presentation.
Surely. Thank you, everyone. It'll be probably a relatively short briefing tonight. It's just an update. Thank you for squeezing us in at short notice.
No problem.
I really appreciate it. Let me just say, as I introduce who's with me, and we have some people listening, and I believe from Army Corps of Engineers and from Maryland Department of Environment, because we've been talking to them about the concept we're going to discuss tonight. When St. Mary's has presented in the past, you've mainly been hearing from people in the parish. I chair one of the ministries, the Environmental Stewardship Committee. With me, we have Mark Hartzell, who is the chief of staff to the pastor, and for the first time, we have a representative, Kevin Devine, from the Redemptorist Fathers Order in Baltimore. There's Kevin.
Hi, Kevin.
Hi, Tim.
Okay, you may recall from one of my earlier presentations when we're going into the history, we said that St. Mary's, the whole property, including Carroll House and its grounds, are actually owned by the Redemptorists. They are the property owners. In 1852, four of the granddaughters of Charles Carroll conveyed the property to the Redemptorists to be consecrated to religious use in perpetuity. So, but tonight, for the first time, we have a member from the Fathers with us, given the stage we've gotten to with the project. And Kevin, as I've mentioned before, we have other permitting agencies listening tonight. I think Jackie's going to join us. Kevin gave me a message that he wanted to convey on behalf of the fathers to our permitting agencies, and it was so good that I just incorporated it into the next slide. So if I can share. Okay, tell me when you see it, please, Heaven. Can you see it?
It's coming.
There we go, Pat.
There we go.
Good.
Yep.
Great. And as I said, this is an update for a consideration for a change to the design. And here's Kevin's message. I'm not going to read it all, but you can see the sentiment it conveys. I'll make a few comments about some of the points he makes here. We are going to be talking tonight about an alteration to the design to control costs. Kevin also mentions in his second bullet that in the period since we first started this project, which was 4 years ago, actually, we have noticed deterioration in the bulkhead. Actually, it's pointed out to us by the Naval Academy, who have been doing their own engineering project on it. But as Kevin mentions in the next point, you may recall the last change we made, and I'll be showing it to you in the next slide, is significantly moved the design we had into the creek to get it away from the historic seawall and the historic gardens, and also had a hybrid design, which I'll discuss in a minute. Well, as the costs were developed on that, it has turned out to be very expensive. That requires a great deal of landfill and rock to support the structure. So we've come up with an alteration to this concept that we would like to run past you in the beginning, because at this point, doing this type of design work is going to require funding by the Benedictus Fathers. That will be significant, and they wanted an early assurance, a reassurance at least, that in conceptually at least, that the approach we're following would be acceptable to our various permitting agencies. And that's the last bullet. We're looking for guidance. So let's go through the current design. When we left this story, on this chart, you'll recall the red line on this, the mushroom-like shapes, is the original design concept we had brought in that would cut significantly into the historic garden, into the boxwoods, etc. So the alternate design we came up with, responding to your request for something more linear, was a hybrid which used a marsh sill along the North Shore and retained the this cove-like structure, which technically is called a headland and tombolo design, along the Western Shore, but it was significantly moved out into the creek from where it would have originally been proposed to be. Let's go to the next one. Now what we are considering is we're looking for a design that can be designed to cost and live within the budget that we hope to get from DNR. We are proposing now to take that linear design, and you see the new red line on this slide. We would retain the marsh, keeping a sill, but we take it all the way around, and Joe will speak to this later for more details. He has helped us with this concept. It would be, in other words, a linear feature all the way along the northern and western shores. Now you see all the detail on this chart in front of, towards the creek, in front of the red line, all those little gray circles, they'd all be gone. The proposal is that we will build another type of wall at the point of that red line to hold the marsh into place. And we have one technique that could do it. There are several techniques, construction techniques that could be used. Let me show a little more detail of this in the sideways on the side view on the next chart. All right. If you can see here, the design we have now has a significant intrusion into the creek. And in fact, on the western shore, it's even further. So what we would propose is to put a wall. In this case, the first concept we're going to discuss with you is called the Gabian rock basket at the edge of the marsh, to hold the marsh there. All of this area in that red circle no fill would again go away. So there's several advantages to this approach. We at this point do not think that we would be changing the width of that marsh. If anything, it might get narrower in order to contain costs. You recall before that we promised we would stay at least 2 feet away from the buried seawall. Possibly we could even go further away from that, the way this is going. But it would certainly get no closer. In other words, 2 of the features that we were specifically addressing in the past for your concerns, stay away from the historic garden, stay away from the seawall, and have a linear aspect to the shoreline, we keep and do even more so. Now it's linear all the way around, except that it'll have to curve in the middle. Next, let me go into the technique we are looking at right now for how that wall would be constructed. We're looking at a Gabian rock basket. You may have seen them in construction, and they're used in many different applications. The initial concept is to surround the top of the rock basket with this Filtrex material, which can be used as a growth medium. The wetland plants would be grown in it. Very likely we would be strewing oyster shells on top that had soaked in a spat tank as well. We would not be covering the front of the basket. We want the crevices in the rocks to be habitat for immature juvenile fish, algae, and so on, because by removing that other fill that we're cutting out to control costs, we will be cutting out habitat potential. So we have to balance the needs of our funding agency, DNR, with the interests of the MDE as well. However, we expect at this point, it's very conceptual. This design work has not begun yet. There might be 2 courses of baskets. The side that is facing the landfill would have the fabric on it to control infiltration. And again, I'm speaking to subjects that Joe will address better in a minute. At the next picture, I'd like you to get another perspective of it. Of course, this is what we hope it would look like when fully vegetated. That would take a few years. I mean, typically projects take 3 years to fully grow in. And as I said, this is relatively simple. Let me come to the next thing. I'll summarize this on the next. All right. The alterations proposed for design control, I mean, by cost control, it was really, we were factors above our budget. There was no way in, no way to control it, nor since the absolute cost also translated into a cost per linear foot that was busting all government guidelines, we weren't successful in seeking extra money either. So the Gabian basket wall replaces a large area of the fill. The altered design keeps all the elements that in our past briefings to you, you've asked us to keep. The linear aspect. The construction is entirely contained within the 1980s landfill. There's no encroachment on the historic gardens or the seawall. Greatly reduces the excursion into Spot Creek. One of the concerns we have with the harbor master and the port warden is the buoy array that's off. It's about 112 feet off the wooden bulkhead, the current wooden bulkhead. Possibly we won't even have to move any buoys if we do this. It's yet to be studied. And the width of the marsh area is retained or possibly even reduced. Let me come to the next. But I don't mean to relay the impression that this is a baked cake yet. The use of the Gabian rock baskets has a lot of advantages. They may have some drawbacks, and we're in discussion with MDE and the Army Corps right now, and we will have to with Claudia to see if we're meeting the intent of the Resiliency Rfp, which DNR put out, under which we were funded originally and hope to be funded for implementation. But if concerns are raised that we cannot resolve on these Gabian baskets, there are other techniques that could be used, and Joe could speak to them more. There are You can use vinyl sheet piling, you can use rock walls, you can use other things. Joe can identify it. What we're looking for right now in talking to everyone is we need for people to identify poison pills and things that you just could not live with if we are forced to it, because we've gotten to the point where the interests of our different permitting agencies may conflict with each other to some extent, and we have to work that out. And we'd also like you to identify what your optimal choices would be within budget constraints before we decide whether to proceed. Now, I told you it'd be a lot shorter presentation this time than last time, so really this is it, and we're here to answer questions. So please go ahead. Tim, you're muted.
It's all right.
Tim,
I've only been doing this for 3 years, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Well, thanks, Pat. We appreciate the update, and I think it's pretty clear. And commissioners, would you like to chime in? Maybe, Pat, if you want to go back
Sure.
to the plan. I guess it's
Okay.
page 3, maybe page 3.
Okay. Up to
This is the
3.
proposed.
Okay. This is the proposed. 4.
Yeah, clarifying questions here, commissioners?
Yeah, I have one, Tim.
Uh-huh.
Either you or John or both of you could weigh in. I would appreciate it. The applicants have understandably emphasized their concern for the costs involved and what would be the best choice for them with their budget. But let me understand, and I think you and John can tell me, the guidelines under which we operate and the purpose of our review has nothing to do with cost or even the technologies. Am I correct?
Yes, we're looking at our guidelines, and they have to do with design features on the exterior.
So if you meet the designs, and this does seem to be a step far in the right direction, at least in my understanding of what's being presented, that's all good. But, you know, looking at the profiles and what kind of materials are going to be used that will be beneath the water and all that, that really, we don't even have any authority over that, do we?
Well, you said something important there that I would like to clarify, what will be below the water. And I think we need to have a bit of a discussion. And Pat, this would be advice for future, is showing us low tide and high tide situations and what will be visible. So Gabians are a different visual impact than a sloping rock wall. And so it's a different visual impact. So we want to talk about the visual impact of a change.
Yeah, but that, Tim, thank you for saying that, because that's exactly the struggle I was having. If we can see it and it affects the appearance of the historic shoreline, then we have authority over making decisions about how that shall be done. But if it's beneath the water all the time, it really escapes our purview, don't you think?
As long as there's no visual impact, yes.
Yeah.
Well, but the most important thing is that whatever is being proposed is sound. So it can't just be a feature; it has to be a sound feature.
Yeah,
we hope. Yes,
that's important.
Okay.
I think we would seek professional testimony that shows the success of this design and confirms that it is sound. That's you would need to include that.
Tim?
Yeah. Yes, Bill. Go.
I have one question, kind of relates to several items on was just talked about. What is the longevity of these, since they are made of wire baskets?
Joe, I'm going to defer to Joe for that.
Sure, I can answer that. You can acquire these Gabian baskets made of several different materials. Some of the materials are coated with an aluminum and trying to remember the other metal. It's a galvanized, hot dipped metal coating, and the manufacturer claims 100 years, which is certainly longer than any
That'll do.
wood structure. Yeah, but in a more harsh environment, you'd expect to see that shortened, but it's probably shortened to half that rather than a decade. So 50 years would be probably the engineering life.
So is that 50 years in brackish water?
Yeah, it's 100 years exposed to the elements, and then in harsher environments, about half of that, with brackish water being a harsher environment. The other point to just have in the back of your minds about this is we have a fouling process that goes on so that organics actually coat the metal so that the metal isn't subject to the same galvanic properties that it would be if it wasn't coated with organic material. And that's our goal with this is to get this material established in aquatic life, whether it's algae, whether it's some form of zooplankton, a film of material would be coating this in the rocks, and the fish would be grazing on it, but that would further extend the life of the metal.
Yeah,
Well,
all that'll be important to put in the test, in all those specifications. Your choice of the exact Gabian would be need to be included in the
Well,
application.
second question, if I may.
Sure.
Are they going to be placed below mean low tide, or will they be above mean low tide?
The initial thought, which is it's a design consideration, so there is no absolute right or wrong, but the initial concept is to place them at mean high water so that we can grow the Spartina right on top. And then of course the Spartina hangs over, and Pat had shown one of the images, I guess it's slide 8, 7 or 8, I guess it's 7, yeah, where the vegetation covers up the Gabion basket, but the Gabion basket could also be placed at a lower elevation relative to tide and sloped up to support the vegetation.
With that
So there's
in
some
mind,
design considerations.
with that in mind, if I may suggest a possible, but my concern is these things will be seen, especially until the plants grow. If it's done in a slope starting at or below mean low tide and then backs up as a shoreline would, it would be more naturalized, I believe. I have no experience with these at all and have no real idea what I'm talking about, but it's just my impression. My concern about the longevity, 50 years sounds great. The wood walls are falling down, the stone walls fell down, partially decayed. So as these break up, the material inside is going to basically fall into the creek and become a sloped shoreline. Am I correct? Now that's in 50 years, 50, 60 years, if that occurs.
Yes, if as the metal dissolves, you would have the stone that's inside of those cages leak out, and that would be that rate of the stone coming out of the cages would be, a function of wave energy, gravity, water currents, and it would settle on the bottom there. Yeah.
And by then, with sea level rise, it'll be below water anyway. So good.
I think that's a valid point. I think from our design review point of view, I would recommend that we recognize that an initial impact will occur, and maybe is this photograph we're seeing here, you're saying is 3 years, and so we just need evidence of how quickly the visual impact will occur. And that's what we'll live with for 3 to 5 years. That's from our design review. I believe that's what we should be looking at, not what might happen in beyond that, really.
True.
We've kicked around a very important design alternative here, the placement of these, and how you mentioned sloped back. Are there I don't know the dimensions. This dimension's kind of hard to tell in the left-hand picture, but they look like maybe 3 feet square. So 3 feet each in the
They're,
unit,
they're,
modules of 3.
yeah, they're adaptable. It would depend on the water depth, the sort of regulatory concerns about the stability of these. So, you know, in a perfect world, we would make them fairly wide and sometimes 2 and 3 courses wide at the bottom, with the upper courses being battered back, so that you have that kind of a slope that you were describing before, almost,
Okay.
I mean, certainly much steeper than a normal shoreline, but you would still see that that sort of slope towards fast land. So typically think about a pyramidal section or a triangular section.
Okay. So I guess what you're asking for tonight is a feasibility of the concept, and in future presentations, you'll give us more detail on design, the actual design. Is that right,
Yes,
Pat?
and I think that's what Pat was hoping for, that, and just if you all see something that you just hate about this,
We don't hate or
to share
dislike.
that.
We see things that are not feasible or not compliant. That's all.
Kevin, would you like to chime in? Is there anything more you would like from the HPC?
No, I think this is helpful and productive. I mean, the concept or the question that was raised regarding the low and high tide levels is something that we certainly need to consider. It does make sense that if we're 3 years for the vegetation to cover these, that we would want to develop something that obscures them more quickly than something 3 years down the road. And hopefully in working with Joe, that's something that we would be able to accomplish. It's an unknown for me as well. But to me, conceptually, it makes sense that we could accomplish that.
Joe, can we on an initial planting increase density of the plants to get a faster coverage?
Yes, you know, the 3-year establishment is, we're saving money on plants by planting small propagules on a pretty spread out basis, like, you know, every one propagule every 2 foot on center. We've used much higher planting densities to get, you know, very rapid establishment. So you can plant them on 6-inch centers and in one season have pretty thick marsh.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Okay. I think what we're kind of saying is, I think what we're talking about is obscuring these pretty quickly will be important from a visual impact point of view. I think that's kind of the conclusion I'm drawing from our conversation. And the less that is above water, the better. But I understand what I guess what you're saying is, from a design point of view, you can only, if they're all below water, you're not going to be able to grow grasses.
Correct.
Okay, so that's the trade-off.
Yeah, so typically the tidal marsh vegetation wants to be growing in that area that's, say, 2/3 of the distance between mean and high tide, 2/3 towards the high tide line. So they'll end up growing down a little bit, but that isn't a strong start for those plants.
Okay.
So if we set it at mean high water, we know the plants are all going to develop very quickly, develop a lot of biomass.
Okay.
But it is a design consideration, and we can actually perhaps even phase, if it comes out that it needs to be installed below mean low water, we can perhaps amend the top for some period of time with something that sort of gives you the Gabian baskets would still be below, but there might be something on top of those that you wouldn't see the Gabian baskets, but you would still be able to grow the marsh.
Yeah.
Almost think about like a peat mat or a coir mat that is organic material that the marsh grows in.
Yeah. I do have experience with these and in road construction and bridge construction. And they generally are very industrial looking, let's just say that. I'm not going to say they're ugly, but obscuring them, it would be important from a view shed point of view. So I think that's what we're kind of, I'm summarizing, I think, some of our conversations and emphasizing the fact that these can be very industrial looking and not in keeping with the beauty of the garden, basically, and the view from the water. So there's a bit of a challenge there. So the more you can do to address that, I think the stronger the application will be.
Tim, a question. How do you feel about vinyl sheet piling, which is used by many people for bulkheads?
I'm not sure what, I need to see an example. There's many types of sheet piling, but I don't know. I'd be interested to see what, I think that the more natural you can look, the better, and vinyl sheet doesn't sound like it would support much growing grass. So you need to show us an example.
And it lacks habitat.
Yeah. It is linear.
I have a question for the HPC that it goes to the height of the vegetation. So you're out on the water and you're looking at St. Mary's property, and the marsh vegetation typically is going to be 2 to 4 foot tall.
Yeah.
Is that
that's no problem.
Is that an issue?
No, my immediate reaction is the most significant view for this property is actually from the Spot Creek Bridge.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then the creek itself is important, but no, that this is a very steeply sloping garden.
Good.
No.
So, Tim,
that would be great too. Hi, Jackie.
I just wanted to mention this. We have, this is going to require both critical areas review and Port Warden's review. And Cynthia, I had Cynthia, tomorrow is Cynthia's last day, but I had her look at this. And she told me at the end of the day that she had looked at it and it would require critical areas approval. We already have a new person on staff whose name is Kim Burke, who would be the person that needs to be contacted about the critical areas review. And Kevin Scott is the person to contact about Port Wardens. And I did suggest to both of them that they watch the presentation from tonight so they could get some context for this current context here. But I also wanted to mention, I believe that there are other places in the city where these Gabian installations have been done. And, there are probably photographs or other places, but it might be helpful for you all to have some photographs of ones that have been installed and have been growing for a couple of years. So you have a better feeling for what they will actually look like.
So Jackie, where do you think those are?
I just remember it coming. I don't know. Kevin or Cynthia would know.
Okay, I'll ask.
That's a great idea.
Right.
Just to emphasize what Jackie is saying, when we get to the final application, those applications will precede us. The approval from Port Wardens and
critical areas
precede our final approval.
Right. And Kim, Cynthia did seem to indicate that this would actually have to be an application that would actually have to go to the critical area commission for approval, as opposed to being something we could approve in-house. But that was based on her looking at what you presented today.
Yeah.
So I would encourage, a follow-up discussion about that with the new person, Kim Burke, who is also a landscape architect and came to us from Bay Engineering.
Oh, great.
I don't think she's a landscape architect.
All right. So if we could we do this? Just, I have one or two more questions there, Pat. If you could go to the map, the plan again, the new plan with the red lines on it. I
Yeah.
just wanted to clarify
Mhm.
that one. Yeah. So it looks like so two things. One is that there's a new feature there on the west side, which is a straight line.
Yes,
Do those curves go away now, or would the Gabians be in kind of a curving fashion over there as well, or will they be straight?
they go away. They're straight.
So it becomes straight. So it becomes actually a simpler design,
Yes.
which I will not want to put words on my commissioner's mouth, but I think we have recommended simple. So that commissioners, do you all agree that that would be an actual improvement?
I agree.
Yes.
Okay, super.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, Bobby's joined us. Hi, Bobby. Thanks for coming. So that was one point. The other was the variable that you said about the grasses themselves and the width of that grassy area. It seems like there's going to be an area of grasses that are growing on the Gabians, and then that same, probably similar type grass just continues up.
Yes.
Okay, so that's a good assumption on my part.
Yes.
So the materials blend together.
Mhm.
It's a nice width proportionally right now. What would make you want to make it smaller? I think it's soft. The edge seems to be in a good proportion.
The
So
cost will be the only thing.
the cost. Okay, it seems to be a recurring
Well,
thing, right?
There's perhaps
If you look at
other.
maybe jump to the section. I'm sorry to interrupt, but if we jump to the section, we can talk about that in a little more detail.
This one?
Yes, thanks. Yeah.
Some of the considerations that affect that waterward dimension will be the federal and state permitting, because you're encroaching waterward. Water depth is another consideration from an engineering perspective. So we can make sure that it's straight, even though along the front of the existing bulkhead, the water depth is not homogeneous. It varies within 20 foot. It could deepen significantly in some areas and shallow in others. So we have to get some detailed information, and then that 20 foot that we're estimating here is based on the amount of wetland that was shown in the prior concept.
Right.
We're matching that, but once we get into engineering, we may want to have other discussions about
Okay.
20 foot versus 15 foot, et cetera.
All right, thanks. I guess my comment there is that you've done what we've asked you to do, and moving it away. The historic bulkhead is there. You're cutting away the existing bulkhead and moving out. Whether it's 15 or 20 feet is probably, from your design point of view, whatever works for your design. You've complied with our major request, was protecting the historic bulkhead and the garden.
Yes.
So I think you have options there. Other commissioners agree with that statement?
I do, Tim.
Yep. Sounds good.
Okay. So this drawing will be super important when in the next presentation, because
Yes.
you'll be able to show us the Gabians and how they're laid out.
Right.
And if you want to present other alternatives, that's awesome. John, you have your hand up?
Oh, I just have a question. So the other shoreline, is there any consideration that the other shoreline's design, the nonlinear shoreline, might be changed to this material?
Yes. I mean, that is the plan, John.
Right.
The west side will now be linear as well.
Okay.
Which I think is, we've agreed, is a simplification and an improvement. Interestingly enough, if it becomes a wall, could theoretically, even when in the winter, it will look different as well. Just saying. We know it will be more visible in the winter than it will in the summer. And that's just a fact. And showing us those, if you could show us winter and summer versions of existing implementations, that will be helpful. But effectively, the linearity will increase in the winter, We're replacing a wooden bulkhead with a metal and rock bulkhead, which can look rather industrial, but the linearity is what we were asking for. And so I think there's no, so therefore this seems feasible. No, we don't use the word poison pill ever. We've never gotten that one. Try this and see it. So, so then any other thoughts or feedback at this point? Commissioners, John? All right, so I think from a summary point of view, the change in design there are still some variables that need to be fleshed out in terms of the visual impact of the Gabian baskets, and examples of successful implementations and with high quality materials will ensure that it will last a long time. I think that's important. And the other variable that we're talking about is the actual width of the marshy area, which again could be a variable that you have control over from your design. Whatever makes a successful design that this thrives. We have around the city seen not so successful shoreline behavior that just wash away within a year or two. So this needs to be emphasized at the higher. I know cost is an issue, but we want this to be around for 50 years. So that balance. Cost is not our quality, and I know you know this. I'm preaching to the choir, but it's a very significant visual place, and it is worth spending the money on the high quality design, high quality materials. Because I know you can use chicken wire and rock box Gabian. This is what you see on road construction, and that's not what we would be expecting to see in your specification.
Agree. Yeah.
Off.
All right.
Okay.
Any other comments? Jackie,
Off.
Jackie, are you on mute or are you trying to join the meeting? All right. Any other comments, thoughts? All right. Have we provided you with the feedback that you're looking for, Pat?
I think so. I thank you very much, Kevin and Joe. Same
Thank you very much.
question.
Thank you very much.
And yep, look
Thanks.
forward to probably another round of pre-apps or another pre-app. We're available to put you on the schedule when you need to.
Okay.
Thank you, Pat.
Thank you.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome. Thank you, John. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Aye.
I noticed Lisa Bell has joined us. Hello, Lisa. Lisa's our new counsel for the commission. All right. Next on our agenda is another pre-application for 69 Prince George Street, the Burtis House. So for Josie, if you could promote the presenters for that, please.
Yep, you have Melanie, Laura, and Jacqueline, or Jackie here.
Oh, great. Hello, Melanie, and Laura, and Jackie. So welcome. Just to introduce the commission here, and this is a pre-application, which is a process we use to provide feedback to future applications. And it should not be construed as approval or disapproval of any design. It's simply a courtesy for feedback to the future applicant. So I'm not sure who's leading your presentation, but can you acknowledge? Laura, are you leading?
Yes, yeah, I'll start and then pass it over to Melanie.
Super. So you do acknowledge the fact that you understand the concept behind our pre-application.
Yes.
Okay, well, great. Please introduce your team and let us know what you'd like to tell us.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, commissioners, and thank you for this opportunity to join you tonight. My name is Laura Houston. I'm the Historic Property Redevelopment Manager for Preservation Maryland, and I'm joined tonight by Melanie Hartwig Davis, owner of H2 Squared Architects, and the architect for the project we'll be sharing with you tonight. And we also have our civil engineering consultant, Bill Bauer with CPJ, on the call as well. I'd like to, everybody say hi to Roscoe. My client. I'd like to give you a quick overview of the project so that we all have context for the work, and then I'll turn it over to Melanie, who will give a little more detail that the detail that we have at this time. So this project is being carried out in partnership with the City of Annapolis and NPS Chesapeake. Preservation Maryland is leading phase 1 of a multi-phase initiative to preserve and adapt the Burgess House. As I'm sure you all know, preserving and repurposing the house was identified in early stages of city dock redevelopment planning as a key component of the larger revitalization and resiliency plans. And since then, the goal for our portion of this initiative has been to safeguard the structure from flooding and the impacts of climate change, to stabilize the house to prevent further deterioration while it awaits subsequent adaptive work, and to raise awareness of its historical significance, not just as a vernacular structure, but as the last waterman's cottage that represents the city's maritime heritage and the neighborhood it was once a part of, and the contributions of each of those to the development of Annapolis. So project preparation and scope thus far has been guided by the recommendations that were outlined in the feasibility study that was released in February 2021. And the study recommended a first phase that entails selective demolition of non-contributing exterior features, lifting the structure, adding a new flood-proofed foundation, and then mothballing to protect the existing building fabric. It also calls for wrapping the site in interpretive displays that highlight Captain Burgess, the Help Point community, the city's maritime heritage, and possibly further adaptive reuse plans for the house. All of which would be informed by research and at least a phase 1 archaeological investigation, if not a combined phase 1 and 2 that's allowed in the city. So that's Preservation Maryland's portion of the project, and details regarding the house's elevation and mothballing needs are still being worked out between project partners and our consultant team. There are additional phases recommended in the feasibility study that fall outside of the work that Preservation Maryland and HD Squared and our consultants will be carrying out. And of course, these include fully adapting the house, adding a compatible addition, and then site work to integrate the house. And the study notes that the new use, which is again still being developed, could be allowed for like interpretive space, harbor master offices, and or headquarters for the National Park Service Chesapeake office. So that's sort of a bird's eye view of what we're doing, what Preservation Maryland's role is, and in relation to the overall view for the house. And with that, I'll hand it over to Melanie, who has a little more to go into, and I think needs to share her screen.
Thank you. May I share my screen?
Yeah, you should have the permissions to share your screen already.
Almost there. You saw me hit it, right?
Go to right, go to share.
All right, there we are. Excellent. Well, thank you again. I am Melanie Hartwig Davis with HD Squared Architects right here on Maryland Avenue. And I have with me Bill Bauer with CPJ to speak certainly to the specifics of our civil engineering challenges we have. So as some of you have seen, we presented a bit of preview here, and it's been just a real honor to work with Preservation Maryland and our team to stabilize and preserve this treasure that we have. So here, just to summarize what Alara said, we are phasing. It's very simple, but just critical to the future of this Waterman's home. We are here to preserve the historic features of the Burgess house. We will then stabilize the structure. We will then mothball, and we believe we're moving forward with a passive ventilation system after the stabilizing of the structure, and then removing the non-contributing portions of the building. We do plan to lift per the recommendation in the feasibility study. We're going to lift this to an elevation of 9.2, which aligns with the Navy's suggestion and recommendation and their goals in fighting climate change and flooding and their efforts at resiliency. And then we're going to set the building down on a flood-proof foundation. So our team has gone out thus far and conducted an architectural survey. As you see here, we have some as-built drawings. And here, for those who haven't been down that way lately, of course, are images of the Burtis house and the various angles at the end of Prince George. The historic preserving and features that we are really focused on, of course, are the front elevation and the detailing of primarily the windows, the cornices and such. So there's a bit of a excerpts here from the Michael Dowling's structural report and feasibility study. In that structural report, he notes the ages of the different portions of the home to identify those that are critical for the historic preservation versus those that are not contributing. So you see here the primary building is from 1886, circa 1886. Then the front porch that faces Prince George, of course, is 1981 to 1921. And then the side porch and the back addition were later dates that are non-conforming. And so those are the specific portions that we plan to deconstruct prior to mothballing, stabilizing, and lifting the home. So another visual to represent that here are these elevations. So the rear addition was put on, of course, for utilities and plumbing, not original to the house. So that would be removed. And then the side porch here facing the water would also be removed. I think the largest discussion that we've had so far is about the ultimate elevation of the home. Currently, the home is at 3.44. And the adjacent Prince George Street is at 1.2. There is significant flooding that happens several times a year, both due to slight sea level change, but also and sea level rise, but also due to insufficient infrastructure there on Prince George Street. So this is something that the Annapolis Public Works staff has continually reminded us about. And so we want to make sure that that's at the top of, it's not within our purview, of course, but it's in the top of our list if we're going to spend the time and the effort to restore this and preserve this and lift it, then we want to make sure that's addressed. This also shows here this of course is the City Dock Action Committee, one of their slides from their presentation that talks about the seawalls that are coming around City Dock and Eco Alley and around. They are now going to extend these seawalls past Burtis House and to the Navy in some fashion, which is encouraging. That was not originally in their plan, so we're glad to see that. Of course, any addition to there is an addition planned. As Laura mentioned, we don't know exactly what the program of that is and lots of details about that, but any addition to Burtis House will help to bring it to meet code and ADA and services that need to come into the building. But any addition will also be at least an elevation of 7 feet, if not higher, 8 or 9. So that's noted there. And as you can see, the elevation, as you probably know, the elevation of the park is 6.5 and 5.0, depending on the location. So that, and then this last slide here just shows a little bit more about the raising of the building and putting it on a foundation and what that looks like in section, thanks to the feasibility study and their anticipations. And then a site section here that shows this on the left is current elevation for Prince George Street. And then there's a light dash line here, which is the current elevation of Burtis House. I can zoom in, maybe. All right, maybe not. So in any case, this shows 9.2 is the proposed Vertis House elevation at this level. And then across here is a line, a blue line that indicates the 7.0, which is, plus or minus where any new structures would have to meet, depending on freeboard and other, of course, water specific issues. So that's really the gist and the bulk of what we are doing and our scope for the phase 1 and the stabilization. And if you have any questions, and certainly about the elevation, and maybe Bill, if you want to talk a little bit about the importance of and the nuances of where this is located and how the elevation will be impacted, if it's higher or lower, or maybe we jump into questions, whatever works for people.
Yeah, well, certainly the current FEMA flood elevation is the base flood elevation is elevation 5.0. The city has 2 feet of freeboard, so the base flood protection elevation is going to be 7. We're going with the Navy's recommendations, which is looking farther into the future with both subsidence and sea level rise, and establishing that 9.2 elevation.
So that's really our presentation. If you have any questions, please feel free.
All right.
Yeah,
So
Tim, I've got
go
some
ahead.
questions.
Go ahead. I said clarifying questions. Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, so a lot of questions I have still, but what will be like that elevation increase? So is it like on piers, like a beach house, or is it like a concrete block effectively that it's on, or what's the construction material of what's going to be the foundation?
So I think more of a concrete block, wet flood-proof situation. The idea and the intent is that it's not going to be an exposed foundation we believe and we anticipate with the rest of the city dock revitalization that surrounding elevations are also going to come up. And certainly they're working on massing models and massing for the addition to the Vertis House. So I believe that on 3 sides of the Vertis House, there will be an addition, and therefore the Vertis House foundation will not be visible. It will be the addition that will have the visible foundation and exposure, depending on, and how much of that, of course, depends on the elevation of the surrounding pathways, sidewalks, park, street, everything else that is going to go around that.
Okay, and is that how people will be able to access it? Because with this drawing, it looks like people won't be able to physically get to it.
I understand that. We're not expecting them to access it because the Vertis House currently doesn't meet ADA, and there is no public access by current code. So the addition is really the critical portion of how to access Vertis House in the future. That is what will have an ADA ramp.
So I would add, again, this is sort of second and subsequent phase determination, but that site integration is intended, or what's proposed in this feasibility study suggests that it will allow access, but the ADA compliance will take place in the addition. It'll connect to the house. So I think I imagine the city will want to make sure that it is accessible. For our portion, it won't be because that site integration will take place after we're finished. But it's not intended to be publicly accessed or inhabited during our part of the work.
So certain aspects of this are temporary conditions. Other aspects are more permanent.
Yes. Or transitional. I mean, it might even be just transitional, right?
That's a good word. Transitional is a good word. Certain aspects are transitional, others are a bit more permanent. Other clarifying questions, commissioners?
If you don't mind, Tim.
Of course.
The front of the Vertis House is on Prince George Street, of course. That is also the lowest elevation. So we now have the front almost a full story higher than it was before. That does change the public's perception of the building. It's now up on a pedestal, up on the shelf where no one can get it. Has any consideration or thought been given to actually raising that end of the street at least a few feet to try to mitigate some of that? Any type of display or anything that can be put in that wall just to add to the story and give people who see this house a better relationship, a better idea of really what it was and where it was, rather than walking up to it and having the impression that this was always on a tower?
Right. So again, that's not within our scope, but the feasibility study does discuss an option for a pocket park and lifting it there and creating, so that it is less of a dramatic grade change. Yes, I think.
Yeah, also add to that we do intend to have a wrap around the property, at least for that will be there for quite a while. That puts it in context, regardless of how high it ends up being. That wrap will be there, and I think there's been discussion and about how to treat that street, the end of that street, so that it's compatible and kind to that. But it will be, because this is the city property. That's something that will ultimately be their call.
Yeah, I don't think that street has ever not flooded.
That's correct. 100 years ago, there are pictures.
Yeah.
And I think, did you all have a chance to see the presentation the joint presentation we had with the Planning Commission this is for the Preservation Maryland team. Did you see the presentation last week? Did you have a chance to look at that?
I did actually watch 2.5 hours of that presentation.
Good for you. Good. It's scintillating, right? I know they talked about a pocket park here. I don't remember them talking about raising the elevation. Do you remember? Oh, Jackie Giles got her hand up. Maybe she remembers.
All right.
Hi, Jackie.
Hello, everyone. No, so I just wanted to talk to you guys about the flooding part of that. Elevating the streets is kind of, and especially in that area, is part of the military installation resilience review we're doing with the county, NSA Annapolis, and the city. So that it's one of the areas we're looking at is the flooding right there and what we can do about it, because it does affect the Naval Academy as well. But also in general, looking at other ways we can address stormwater and flooding in that area as part of the city dock reimagining plan.
So
and the Burtis House is part of that.
Great. I'm reading into that, so it's possibly likely that the street level will be raised and additional improvements in, well, just the raise. You think it's likely that there'll be some elevation raise here of several feet?
It could be an elevation raise combined with other measures, or the other measures could take care of the problem. So I can't guarantee you there'll be an elevation raise with the street, but it is a possibility.
Okay.
I'd be very skeptical of raising the elevation. I don't see how that's going to solve the problem.
It would just.
But we're talking about two different problems. Which problem? I think raising the elevation from an aesthetic point of view would solve a problem in terms of the building. But I think, Kevin, you're saying raising the elevation will stop flooding.
No, the elevation raise alone will not. There have to be other measures as well.
Yes.
And those are all being looked at right now.
But whatever happens, we're going to have to look at what that wall looks like.
Yes.
With the idea that it will always be what it gets first built as.
Yes. I think what we can summarize this as saying, we know there's going to be a major visual impact on the primary facade of this building by raising it up, and mitigation of that could occur, but we don't know. We don't know what the designs are going to be, so we're kind of guessing right now. But we flagged it as an issue. I think that's all we can really do at this point.
Right now, I assume it's CMU unpainted.
I would hope we could do better than unpainted CMU. I think they've talked about wrapping it with,
Interpretive wrapping. Yes.
Yeah. As long as it isn't the local graffiti.
well,
As long as there's not a new billboard.
Hey, that billboard's historic.
It must be because it's still there.
we digress. Other clarifying questions, and then I'll kind of start a conversation at least.
Yeah, another one.
Kevin,
This elevation page is great, but I was hoping to see an after elevation of if any windows or doors are going to be behind these red spots that are taken away.
We are not going to alter anything that's not already there. We will preserve the windows that are there that are historic and need preserving, and add a ventilation system like louvered. We're working with Preservation Maryland and their team, design team on that, because we do anticipate the addition covering the non-historic contributing elevations in a pretty significant way. Our job is to hold tight and just stabilize it, right? I mean, and mothball it. It's the next phase 2 that's really going to speak to the massing, to what it looks like with the surrounding and how high, and the proportions of the building that comes in next to it, whether it be the harbor master or some other, but the gateway to our city.
Yeah, I guess what Kevin's saying is, when you take off these red components in the temporary basis, what's your facade look like? Are you just gonna put siding in there, or you're going to do something to preserve it? So what is that design going to look like will be important. Obviously, it's not in this.
Okay, we'll take note. We haven't gotten to that phase yet, but we will take note and make sure that that's in our next presentation.
Yeah, it'll be something that seals the structure. I mean, one, it'll allow it to breathe, but it will also protect it from further damage from the elements, or any if anybody wants to try to get in there in the meantime, protect against that as well.
Yeah, so further details. It's a transition, but the transition could be very adverse, have an adverse impact to the rest of the environment if it isn't done well. So the design is going to be important. I don't know what you could take this any direction you want. You could make it look, hey, future coming soon, or blend it in, but you need a design decision is going to be made, and I don't know, you have choices.
Right.
That's what, Kevin, was that your question? What is
it?
Yeah.
So next presentation, we'd like to see that, I guess. Then the proportions are at this point, have you done a window survey at this point to know that all of them are going to be restored, or some of them are beyond repair, or some of them are not historic yet? Have you done that study?
Not beyond what Michael Dowling has in his structural report. We have been, honestly, the building isn't truly accessible. It's been, it has not been remediated since the flood last October. And so my staff is the only the only ones. I have not actually advocated for my consultants to go in yet and do a full survey until it gets remediated. It is pretty toxic in there.
Great. Well, a window survey, you would need to enter the house to do a full window survey, but at least in your next presentation, you probably can give us existing conditions. And I don't remember whether that was in Michael Dowling's report or not. A window by window survey will be important for your.
So these images did come from.
Yeah.
From his report, of course. At least the windows, the center is our elevation.
Yeah, I just don't know whether there's an actual window by window survey, which would be needed.
Right. Well, we have Barton Ross on our team, and he's going to be assisting with that. But again, I mean, we're trying to be as considerate of everybody's time as possible, and when they come on site, to be able to do the full exploration and documentation, and not just piecemeal it.
Right, I agree. I'm just giving you the guidance that in the eventual application, and of course, restoration is going to be recommended as opposed to replacement.
Oh, absolutely.
All right, then one more question, we held it for last. Could you go to the section and that I'm asking, clarifying, in order to comply and be consistent with the city dock design, elevation is 7 feet. You've chosen 9.2 because the Navy did. But Navy recommends that. It's another 2 feet on something that is going to be dramatically higher. It's going to. So I'd like to hear some justification for that, because I would say that creates an additional adverse impact on this building is the extra 2 feet.
So I think each of us, Laura, Bill, and I all have a kind of some input on that possibly, but the Navy, as you know, this is the closest building to the Navy. So there's a balance of what the city of Annapolis is doing to what the Navy is doing. 9.2 is not set in stone by any means, but with, and maybe Bill can speak a little bit to the wave action and anything else that might come. Certainly if we're making the investment and aesthetically we can work it in context with the next phase 2, then having the higher the better. From a resiliency standpoint, but maybe Bill can say a little bit more to that.
Right. So the 7.0 is the flood protection elevation today. The Navy study looks farther into the future, taking both sea level rise and subsidence of the land into consideration. And that's where they're really coming up with their 9.2.
Are you saying we should actually, I'm confused by that statement, because we're moving forward with a 50-year plan for a city dock at the moment at 7.0. And that's, so I'm confused that a new standard is being brought in, applied to a city building. So I would say, and to a further point in the future, what point is that? I don't know. But I think that the raising these, we know we have to raise them. There's no question about that. But this site is significant, and this is a significant building. We're trying to mitigate the adverse impact on historic property. It's already going to be difficult, and raising it another 2 feet, it doesn't accomplish that goal. I'd also say that on this site, another 2 feet against the Naval Academy wall and the field house is not a, it's not, so I'm not seeing the justification for the additional 2 feet in this presentation, but you can, in future presentations, perhaps give us more information.
Yeah, we certainly want to make sure that what we do in this phase is going to protect the house long term, be right for the house and for what's happening around the house. So our conversations, we're regularly communicating with city staff and the city dock redevelopment team to make sure that this building will be properly prepared and protected for its next phase.
Well, that's super important that you're coordinating with them, because I think they would say that if they're designing at 7 feet, you've created another step up by changing this building. So again, I'm not seeing the two designs working with two different levels here. So I'm just raising that confusion on my part. So maybe in the
I think that's a fair statement. And we are attending their meetings, and I think as they are coming along, we're certainly paying attention to that. I also add that we're in communication with the Navy and some of the future goals that they have for the gate at the end, and how that will also integrate. So I think that there are a number of moving parts here that have to all collide at some point, and there will be some compromises made, I'm sure, but we're all trying to work through what our priorities are and what the issues are going to be.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to speak for the other commissioners. I'm not sure I'm the only one who feels that this way, but if you added another 2 feet to something, we are trying to mitigate the height. If any other commissioners,
if I could chime in.
Yeah.
As someone who sat through the City Dock Action Committee's presentation the other night, one of the things that I've heard mentioned a couple of times already is the potential addition to the Burtis House. There's a potential addition to it, and then there's a the city whatever it is,
Coding facility?
the dock master
master.
building in
Harbor
addition
master.
to it. Those things are already in the first initial plan that we saw going out onto so that they would essentially block the view from Dock Street. We had a conversation about this during the presentation, and there was a lot of really good give and take and information shared about what could potentially be these buildings that are out there. But as you just said, Tim, the minute these things go up, they gain bulk and mass. And if we're talking about additions that could potentially be on this building, we need to be thinking about what's that going to do as it comes out onto Dock Street.
Tim?
Yeah, Will.
I think Bobby just made a good point. We need to consider what the ultimate impact will be. But to that point, I think I've made clear how ugly I think the field house is. And since we're talking about raising it 2 feet, that seems to be what we're talking about right now, is this
the difference between 7 and 9.
I'd say extra 2 feet. Given the proximity of the field house and the fact that it seems this 2 feet variation is driven by seawater rise concerns, I have no problem discussing it. And unless I saw something that would be very shocking and inappropriate, I could support that.
Okay. So you're saying in the scale of the streetscape, 2 feet is not a big deal?
No.
Okay, I understand what you're saying. That's a valid, I mean, that's the conversation we're going to have, I think, eventually.
Yeah.
Here.
Oh yeah, eventually we're going to have to talk about all these.
It is a permanent,
additions.
right? Once it's built at 9 feet, it's going to stay there. Whereas it's built at 7 feet, it could be moved to 9 feet.
Or if it was built at 9 feet, it could probably be taken to 7 feet if there was ever a reason for that.
I wouldn't reverse that from a cost point of view. We don't really know. We're kind of casting a straw, so I thought I'd raise the issue. We don't really know what the design is going to look like. It does create a new baseline for their design when they get to it at 9 feet, if they're designing at 7. And that's just the point. And then this trench, what we see here is that we've already talked about how this is going to be handled on that design, but that's not this project. Right now, I guess this is a transitional project for this phase. We're seeing the idea that it will be a bit of a tower surrounded by a wall with interpretive panels for 3 to 4 years, probably.
I'd like to make one clarification about this, because I know it does look like a trench in this section. And that's how, in my mind, I needed to work through the different elevations at the time.
No, you're right.
But the Burtis House doesn't actually, it's not actually at Dock Street.
I know.
It's down here at the end where there's an elevation of about proposed of about 5 here. So it really does depend on what is going to happen in this section here. Good with point. The addition and with the walkway and the connection to the park. So I do not expect the ultimate, whatever the phase 2 is, and the surrounding city dock revitalization work, that the extensive work that's being done. I don't expect this to be the reality. It's just something that I worked through in my head to understand.
Understood.
Really,
I understand.
More there. Okay.
Yeah. So this we're dealing a little bit but if you're working together with them, then in your next presentation, if we've gone further and they're still in pre-application mode too. So we don't know what a section would look like at this point, although we saw one the other day. I also want to think that it is important to work with the Navy. Opening up gate 0 is, and completing the landscape design of that whole section. I would hope someone can really take ownership of. It's a little bit in no man's land right now, and I know, but I would hope that can be included in this project as well.
What is the current elevation of the waterside walk on Burtis House? Do we know?
Are we looking at that about 4?
It's about 4, give or take.
It's about 4.
So that's the floor level of the first floor. Is that what you're asking, Bill?
It's above the first.
It's above the first floor because Burtis sits in a hole all the way around.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
So
the
I'm
walkway.
An idea.
Yeah. So the dock right now, the walkway dock is at 4 feet, and then Burtis steps down.
So Burtis is going to be at about what? 5 foot
Mhm.
higher than that.
Right now.
It'd be the height, the foundations can be the height of a,
Well, the
person.
floor level is going to be the 5 foot higher than
yes,
the walk.
so it'll be at eye level basically of a normal. Yeah, yeah, it's going to be up. No question.
I mean,
To
it's
save
just,
it. Yeah, it's all done.
well, all I can say
We don't
is
have a lot of way to space it back. Other things are when other places have been raised, you can handle it with landscaping, planters, and things like that around them. We don't have that opportunity on Prince George side, unless I don't know, a pocket park there. It could. Who knows what that design is going to be? But planting on that side of the street could mitigate that foundation.
they have the room there between Burtress and the empty lot to build
on that
pocket
side,
park, even raise it up a little bit.
Well, that'll be something I think we recommend eventually. Yeah,
and that would help mitigate the overall impact.
agreed. That's not as we know, and we'll be recommending that in the future.
Cody, that's just a dog on a screen somewhere.
Somebody's dog wants to participate. I think the dog loves this design.
I'm sorry, that is my dog. I've learned to ignore her. I didn't even realize she was chiming in.
Yeah, there you go.
That's why.
I'm sorry that I had to admonish my dog because I thought it was a dog in the backyard somewhere.
All
Sorry.
right.
Apologies.
Well, the dog has the last word. Any other thought? Have we provided you with the feedback that you need, folks? I'll summarize very briefly because I think this is a presentation of the Burtis House mothballing project, which is a transition phase, and we discussed a series of changes that will be important even in the mothballing phase, having to do with window repair, which is D3, D5, D16 guidelines having to do with preserving original features. So that'll be looked at in the final application. D2 has to do with demolition. We didn't talk about it specifically, but did any commissioners have any issues with demolishing the non-historic components? I didn't sense anything there. And there was a recommendation when that is demolished that more detail be provided in the treatment of the facades for the transition period. You mentioned right off the bat, which was great, that archaeology studies will be done in the process of doing this phase. And finally, there was discussion back and forth about the alternate going to the city level of 7.2, which is required to the a higher level, which would perhaps provide a longer term flood prevention, flood mitigation condition. Okay. And just in summary, also, this is to be determined with coordination with the Harbor Master Building Design, and in future presentations, they will be progressing, and you possibly can incorporate their concepts into some of your presentations as well, and then we'll all have a little bit more to talk about in terms of visual impact.
Certainly.
Okay.
Thank you.
So thank you. Hopefully, did that provide you with what you need for your next steps?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. All right. We have two more. How are we doing on time? We managed to fill up the time. All right. You're welcome to stay if you'd like to listen to the next discussion, because I'm going to give some feedback or a report out on my trip to Cincinnati to the National Association of Preservation Councils commissions, which is a biannual affair. This is the first time it's been in person in 4 years, so people were very excited to be there. I was there Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Stayed in the hotel we stayed in was built in 1931. I don't know if any of you have ever been in Cincinnati. It was the Hotel Netherland. The interiors were spectacular. Art Deco designs beyond belief. So that was really fun. But our last discussion was the theme that dominated the whole conference: flood mitigation, disaster resiliency. Was almost implied in I would say 60% of the presentations. So that the context that we have with City Dock is super obvious to us. The other, and we're all on the same page. We're a little, I would say, everyone's a major cities at the coastal levels are about where we are in terms of planning. Certain cities have a little more advantage in terms of the way their existing structure is. But I think what it made it to me, we're going in the right direction in City Dock in general, but we need to pull our Keeping History Above Water report, which was done 3 years ago. We should pull it off the shelf again. I've mentioned this before, and take a look at some of the details that we need to make sure we don't forget about. And, the survey was done on that, on significant existing buildings, historic structures, and prioritization of those buildings. And in an emergency, how you coordinate with the agencies that are involved in reacting to a disaster. And is the human infrastructure in place? Who calls who to crank the wall up when it needs to be cranked up, if they're activated, if the button activated. So there's a lot of discussion about making sure your human infrastructure is in place when you have even though you have all the fancy engineering in place. And some of that is, I think it's worthwhile for us in this fall to take a look at that report and see what role we play. It probably needs to be updated. So that was the main thing I wanted to report out to you about flood mitigation. There were some other interesting conversations about thematic framework that other cities are doing in reinterpreting their in the survey work they've done in the past. They're going back and surveying the areas again and taking a look at different themes having to do with diversity and inclusion. And so when we do anything interpretive or we place priorities on certain things, we need to look with fresh eyes on some of the surveys that were done 30 years ago. We're doing a little bit of that, but I think we can pick it up as a preservation team. I think that the port markers thing that Janice Hayes-Williams is doing is bringing that to the surface a little bit. When we get to the Berta's house, the interpretation panels that we put on there, we should be looking at the themes that we are embracing. And I went to a replacement window presentation. It's a guy from the National Park Service, John, you might know his name. I can't remember it, but he's the guru of window replacement. So he showed us lots of good and bad examples, which I think we all pretty much understand. And the National Park Service guidelines we are familiar with. There's still the emphasis on wood. There was not a discussion of replacement materials from their point of view at this point. Talked a little bit about infill and compatible use of energy conservation, which I think the parking garage would be considered for us an infill project, and we have incorporated solar panels into that as effectively a roof. They're being used as cornice kind of lines, and also in some cases in new buildings in historic areas. So that was another thing that ran through. Then just a final note, I was interested just how much of an impact the National Park Service and their guidelines continue to have an impact on the training of the people that were there. I was pleased to see there were a wide range of ages, young people there. So the people that are being trained coming out of school and they're really looking to the National Park Service, and the National Park Service is kind of stepping up with guidelines and bulletins, and that was something that was good we take for granted to a certain extent, but it was good to hear. So that was it.
Tim, did anybody touch on outdoor dining at all?
No.
Really?
No.
Because it's a hot potato item.
Yeah.
No, they didn't, and I didn't bring it up in it. I think there wasn't too much discussion of the pandemic in general and its impact as an emergency. There was a little bit of it, but no one did that. So I think we're on the right track there. Any other thoughts, questions? We can transition a little bit to John's next topic is, John, you can give us an update on how outdoor dining, I know you're working hard on it, looks so much better than it did.
Well, let me give you a little history here.
And then we're going to talk about one more thing after that, John, and this is John's topic to have to do with rooftop antennas, utilities in general on rooftops, which are a real become. We talked about.
I'll be brief about it, but we approved with conditions the new windows at 163 Main Street. This is just to give you an idea of how the back and forth goes. And so I sent an email to the manager of 163 Main Street saying,
that's Acme, right?
The Acme, right. These are your conditions, and you'll have to comply with the fixtures and furnishing guidelines. Keep in mind that you'll have to create an application for administrative approval. And the response was, is this email a joke? One line, not hello, not dear John, nothing. And there's a little bit of back and forth. And now the architect, Joe Mayer, is wondering where the permit is. And I had to remind all parties that the conditions haven't been met. And I hope that it's not a surprise to, is this a joke? But he's not getting his permit until we get an application for his fixtures and furnishings. The worst part of it is that aside from his umbrellas, the approval would have been perfunctory. It would have been simple, easy, take no time at all, practically a rubber stamp. But it became something else. And there's quite a bit of that. Are you telling, I got another one. Are you telling me that the furniture that I've used for the last 2 years during the pandemic emergency isn't approvable?
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, it's not.
It's an emergency.
I'm really sorry, but you're going to actually have to step up your game because design integrity is important. Yeah. You have a place on the street, on one of the most important streets in a very important historic city with an incredible viewscape. You don't get to choose plastic.
Yeah. And it was an emergency. We understand it was an emergency.
Right. And and Roberta and I, during that, we backed off.
We were flexible.
Right. Yeah. But it's new. So a fair amount of time spent on that. However, one by one, all of these things can be addressed. And kicking and screaming, we'll see if we can get compliance.
Yes. Thank you for your hard work.
It's just, it's amazing. In the morning, everyone says, well, why do you walk? And I say, so that I can see everything that's going on, and I'll take a different route. So I can see what's going on. And it's just amazing. I pull out the camera, I'm snapping pictures, and I think, well, there's 2 hours right there. But that's all part of the job. The important thing is Main Street right now and City Dock are areas that need attention and focus. And I'm going to continue working on those because I do think that non-compliance with our considerate guidelines for outdoor dining fixtures and furnishings chips away at the integrity of the experience for others, not necessarily restaurant goers, but for others. So it's important. And the mayor himself said he wanted it to be beautiful. So we'll continue. I will continue to work toward that. So for other the other consideration that I have right now And I shared an application with Kevin. I don't know, Kevin, if you got a look at the web of utilities that was planned for the side of the building. But it was really rather extraordinary. They submitted a very simple plan for mini splits. I thought, perfect. You know, this is great. This is so simple. There are just 3 line set covers required. And then the next submittal was a web of line set covers, such as I've never seen. And I said, I have to deny it. You know, please try to simplify this. But the fact is, it's everywhere for all kinds of things. So we not only have our typical HVAC equipment, which is traditionally something that we can deal with fairly easily, but now we have the energy companies saying that all gas meters must be in the front of buildings. They will all be changed to the front of buildings. So that's another thing. And then, and do you want me to explain why? You've already seen it once. You've seen it at St. Anne's.
At St. Anne's, we've seen it.
Right. And so there was
For their cost
possibility of
reduction?
screening there, but there
Right.
isn't everywhere else.
No.
But John, could I ask a question about that?
Yes.
Because they went through the rest of the city to residential structures and did, did meters or whatever they did with regard to utilities that could be read from the street. So they no longer had to come into our houses. Used to be, I mean, since I've been a long-term resident, we had to, our meters had to be read from this, read in, or
yeah.
Oh, yeah. Right, read inside the house.
So now they don't have to be read inside the house. They are read from the street just by a drive-through thing. So why would they have to be on the front of the building?
This goes back to a natural gas disaster in, I believe it was Massachusetts.
Lowell, Massachusetts.
Yeah, and there was an engineering issue that caused a commercial level of natural gas to flow to residences, and there were explosions, and I believe people died.
Yeah.
Now, the solution was for the utilities, which have made the mistake, to create a burden for exterior venting of gas connections. So that's the reason for it. I thought, well, gosh, you guys, and I said this at St. Anne's, I said, well, it seems to me that this is an engineering issue. There was a mistake made, but in 150 years of gas service, this hasn't happened frequently. It just seemed like it became an excuse to make the installation process easier for the utilities. And if anyone is affiliated with a utility, excuse me for sounding cynical, but that's what I think the outcome ultimately was. And so sometimes even when an application is approved for, and I've pushed and pushed and pushed for interior installation, it doesn't happen. You know, on a Saturday, they'll come in and I'll be looking at pipes on the front of a house. One unfortunate man wanted to put his meter on the front of a house that had an HA easement on it, and I said no. And he ended up not putting in gas and switching everything to electric. So that was an unfortunate outcome, I thought, because BG&E would not service him with gas on the inside. Anyway.
Well, John, you can look at that as a positive environmentally, because the electricity is theoretically, can be at least, or ecologically correct.
Well, at any rate, people do want gas, and it's just a matter of, I think, strengthening our guidelines so there isn't an opportunity for any gray area to be interpreted by those who are proposing these installations. The problem is that we have guideline D.29, and it's really slim. It has one operative phrase, and that is these utilities should be in unobtrusive locations. That's not even strong wording. I can't believe that I get it to work, but it does, and I think it's
I'm
very
getting a little background.
Yeah, I get some weird feedback thing.
Yeah. So if we're not speaking, okay, I'll mute myself. Maybe Jack. Who else?
So, John, I guess, I mean, if I know that over here in Homewood and Germantown, that they do remote sensing of all these meters, I don't understand why they can't do that downtown.
Well, it's the actual connection to the building that they're no longer running. They no longer want to run the pipe underground and then into the building. They want it to terminate on the front of the building and then be picked up from the front of the building to service the residents.
So is this for new gas installation, or are they saying they're going to change
anytime
existing?
there's an upgrade.
An upgrade.
An upgrade, or the gas pipe needs to be replaced.
So if a restaurant is increasing their gas needs because they're building a larger kitchen, that would be an example of an existing building that would have a change.
Now, sometimes it's possible to find an alternative. You know, we can do this in the back. You have access here, and so on. But as a contractor, I used to deal with it also. And you know, the only the most myopic are sent. There's there's not really a lot of negotiation that will occur. But okay, so there's that, and then we have other things that haven't been so prominent before, but are beginning to become more prominent, such as security equipment. And we're not dealing, we really don't have a guideline for that. And then the most important thing, which I spent quite a bit of time on with an applicant or a soon to be applicant today, for antennas. Antennas, communication equipment, all of those utilities, there's a lot of pressure to install them. And I think I have 3 applications right now, or 3 soon-to-be applications. It begins with a bit of a fishing expedition, and then I get a 106 that could be accurate or inaccurate. And the 106 is supposed to, the Section 106 report is supposed to catapult the application to approval. But what's happened with one of the most recent soon to apply projects is that all they showed MHT was a roof with nothing but their own equipment on it, when the roof is actually packed with communications equipment. So MHT wrote, this will have no effect on the streetscape. And you know, this is a problem.
The new administrative services building?
Sorry?
Is it the new administrative services building?
No, it's Annapolis Waterfront Hotel.
And why would they trigger a 106 review?
Because the last one did. The last one had a 106 review for impact on the viewscape. I should send you some of these 106 reviews.
I didn't realize that. I didn't realize it was. I didn't realize 106 reviews were triggered by MHT on any commercial building. So I thought those were really state-owned or federally owned buildings. But I'm glad to hear there was a review. So to your point, you're saying that what the drawing you saw is the drawing you've seen are inconsistent?
Right.
And
So my request today with that was, and the applicant is simply trying to represent her client. She's not designing the project. She's trying to get approval because there's a lot of revenue. Revenue to the property owner, revenue to the service provider. And
no revenue to the city or the citizens.
I'm not sure about that. I didn't ask. I don't think so.
Tim?
Yeah.
You know, we've talked about this before, and John is the one with boots on the ground, and he knows these problems and has demonstrated how it's a growing concern. But we can't be the first city that's tried to deal with this. And,
I know.
And what I would suggest is, rather than us talking about how one applicant's being processed or another, isn't there some place where we can at least get a starting point for you and John, or John and the Office of Law, to draft something? It's clear that we need to do this. And rather than talking about it, we should be doing.
Well, my suggestion is, and Jackie Rouse very kindly provided some guidelines for security equipment in Wilmington, from Wilmington, North Carolina. I think we can write guidelines. Yeah. And I talked to I talked to Roberta Lehner about this, and she said, you know, she was interested in working with me on it. And
excellent.
I think that if we have to be the lead on this, it doesn't bother me at all.
No, we should do that.
Right, but we need to.
We have the capability.
Right. Yeah. We need to before our first challenge.
Yeah, and the gas concerns me. The gas concerns me more in some respects than the electronics and the surveillance and all of that stuff, because gas is inherently more dangerous than electricity. And while I can appreciate an individual's right and a desire to have something that I wouldn't have, but I don't think that the fact that somebody wants gas should weigh upon us in protecting the historic district at all. They're ugly. They're obtrusive. It seems to be being done just as you've described it, John. It's being done for saving the expense of the utilities. I don't give a damn. Really?
Tell us what you mean.
I agree.
We should write guidelines that preserve what we feel is worthy of our, highest standards, and let them wrestle with it. And unfortunately, you wrestle with it through the process if we can get them enacted.
Yes, I just drafts are going to come, and you all will be reviewing them. I'll send you information. I'd also like to share some pictures with you, maybe in an upcoming meeting like the next one. And well, thank you for that vote of confidence.
I like pictures. There we go. Well, I think
you might be surprised.
Yeah, you probably. I mean, sometimes you develop calluses on your eyes. You don't even see how bad things are, and it's right in front of us. You don't need to sell us on this concept, John. I don't think we're ready. Yeah. Will's point is we're ready to go ahead, I think, as a group and improve. There's two that we can piggyback on. D29 that John mentioned, which generally deals with utilities, but overall protection of character is D9. And, it talks about, the roofscapes and domes, chimneys are important visual elements. When you clutter them up with antennas, you are not in compliance. So strengthening that is another, adding the word antennas or utility equipment is just something we're talking easy.
John, do you not still have some money in contract services that was never spent? That perhaps you could even consider like hiring Roberta to write guidelines.
Well, I can do it for the next fiscal year. We actually went over budget this year on different things and different.
Well, we're in the next it's July, so we're in the next fiscal year. So
John, that was a nice bicycle I saw you on the other day.
Yeah. John claims he needs that as a work vehicle.
Right.
I would sign off on that, John.
Okay. I'm just going to say that with regards to looking to models, you know, the conference that tend to often has excellent responses on what's happening in other historic
I will do that.
preservations about that.
I
The other
did poll
part of it-
everybody. Yeah, I did poll everybody I talked to. I even talked to the person from Wilmington, North Carolina. She was there and she wasn't aware of her own guideline. So
yeah.
But Tim, I think I had sent, John, I sent you like 3 different sets of guidelines.
we'll work on it.
From before. So
Yeah.
it's really, I mean, you can just Google this stuff and find guidelines.
You can.
For
Right,
Well,
we'll use
If it's
what we
possible that I can
to-
weigh in,
Of course, Lisa.
we can get that information from you if that's something you'd like us to take a look at.
That would be great.
Okay.
Do you understand? Yeah, so what we're looking for is guidelines for managing construction of communication antennas is the main problem we have.
Okay, well, I'm on the National Trust Forum bulletin line.
Okay.
And all you have to do is put out a question there, and they will respond with, you say, we're having issues with this topic, and you will receive responses from all over the country.
Yeah, it sounds like you just volunteered, Kim. I'm not on that forum. Why don't you
Kim,
do that?
I'll be sending you an email, and
Okay,
maybe
I just
we
wait.
can work on this a little together.
Well, I think Kim is.
Kim,
Kim,
that's
if you-
I think I'm on
a
Lisa.
fine executive
I
action,
think I'm
Kim.
on Lisa Craig's membership. Actually, but
well, if you don't
I think
mind,
that-
go ahead. I mean, when the delegate,
actually,
let's
there
spread the-
are, you know, either the
All right.
Nationalization of Preservation Commissions or the National Trust Forum is,
Okay.
you know, is always putting out questions and
They
people
are.
are responding.
I'm always. I get them
So we
daily.
just need to take advantage of our memberships in those groups because
Yes.
they can provide us with a lot of useful information.
Well, I'm interested in anything.
You
that
should.
anyone
It's not
has.
we. It's you. I'm trying to get you to volunteer.
I'm interested in anything that you
for
can help
us.
with, Kim.
It's just for us. What?
I'm sorry.
For our benefit.
Of course. Well, let's keep this on our agenda. And in September, we got, we have the whole month off. If anybody, just take any resources you want. And Lisa, thank you for offering. We are not the first that are confronting this. It's all over, and it's been around for a long time. Remember satellite dishes on residential? Satellite dishes were the bane of our existence. Same issue.
They're still in the historic district.
There are a few, but luckily not too many.
They've gotten bigger.
Oh.
Bigger?
You should look at the Annapolis Waterfront Hotel from.
Oh no, I mean on
Rock Creek
residential. I
Bridge.
mean on individual residential buildings. That'll. Yeah. Oh, commercial. Yes, it's crazy. Yeah. Well, we have looked at it together, John. It's getting worse. But we had a good outcome when in the early days with cell towers inside St. Mary's and in St. Anne's. There are they put them inside the steeples.
Yes, that's well done.
That's the same thing can be done on the waterfront.
At a minimum, organize them and screen them.
Well,
To
Tim, I
marry
think I
up,
wrote you an email.
they do
But
have
I-
those on the waterfront hotel that were approved several years ago that are the flat panels on the side of the building, I believe.
Well, it's not there
I
anymore.
vaguely remember that.
Well, they've gone and installed alterations that are
Yeah,
not,
well,
without an application.
Right, they
They've made-
want to do that, and that's been a long-standing problem
Yeah.
with them since it was built.
And it's another example of alterations that are being done without approval.
Right.
It's an
And
alteration.
very difficult to resolve. There was a whole big, huge issue a few years ago with their dumpster, where they had dumpster outside. Does anybody remember that? It took
Yep.
years.
Yeah.
And
Well, compliance is a problem.
yeah, compliance is a problem all over the place.
Let me say that our new city manager believes that if there is a violation, that no approval should be issued for a property until the violation is mitigated.
Does the
And-
Waterfront Hotel have any pending applications otherwise?
Well, that's where the applicant is proposing a large installation.
Of antennas or something else?
Antennas, right.
Oh, okay, well, at least they're starting the process to get the application. So
Right.
have to come into compliance. All right, well, that
Right.
gives us leverage.
Yeah.
All right. So we have action items, all of us do some research in the next 6 weeks. And so what we'll be looking at is maybe strengthening D9, which has to do with overall character, and taking a look at D29 having to do with gas meters and communication. So we've had success in the last year modifying individual guidelines and moving them through a process, which we were able to do in about 3 months. And so we can use that same process.
Thank you.
Is that why we have August off?
Except for the people that are on Tim's new subcommittee.
That's right. We're meeting weekly.
Okay.
All right. Any other business? All right. Well, thanks, everybody. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? All right. Well, I hope everyone has a nice, relaxing month. So, and we'll see you in September.
Of research.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Thank you, Kim. We're gonna have a